when you do spend money on ads, you're giving Meta and Zuckerberg money, but their customer service is awful. LinkedIn is noise. There's a lot of noise. Everyone's kind of doing the same thing when you scroll on it. How do you make your profile pop? How do you make a difference?
Welcome to another episode of Smarter Podcasting with me, your host, Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. I started my first podcast in 2019 as a hobby, and I've been able to build that podcast into the longest running English language podcast in Vietnam, I think, and in the top 10% of podcasts worldwide, and it's still growing, which is really, really exciting. Smarter Podcasting is here to help you make the best podcast possible. So I'll be sharing my tips, my tricks, my failures with you to help you. And I'm also going to be talking to experts in the field to help you make the best podcast possible. And I am really, really excited for today's episode because I have a guest who personally helped me with my LinkedIn. And that's what today's episode is going to be about: how to grow your podcast, grow your personal brand using LinkedIn. And this is something I never used to use up until about 9 months ago. And now I've seen it help me grow so much. My guest today is a creative B2B marketing and branding strategist. He has worked with 3 startup companies, including starting his own soon. He ran a very successful food blog, which he then sold. And he has helped businesses generate over $10 million in revenue. So I am really, really excited to talk today to somebody who I attended their LinkedIn workshop and it instantly helped my LinkedIn immeasurably. My guest today is Joel Zarilla. Thank you very much for coming on Smarter Podcasting.
Thanks for having me, Neil.
So first of all, tell me, what is the difference between LinkedIn and all the other social media platforms?
So from my perspective, because I work in B2B, LinkedIn is the playground for B2B professionals, right? So you have B2B people trying to sell their services or just network, but it's the only platform that exists specifically for the B2B area. So compared to all other social medias, everyone's talking about business. Very few people are talking about the food they ate yesterday, their trips, whatever. Everyone's talking about business. They're trying to share tips on growing their business as a way for them to generate leads, for example. But everyone's just talking about business.
Now that, to me, makes perfect sense because with 7 Million Bikes Podcast, and we are a podcast production agency, we focus primarily on podcasts that support businesses. And there are so many podcasts out there. We work with personal podcasts as well. We've worked with knitting podcasts, which ultimately, even though it's about knitting, they're trying to build their business at the back of it. And so there are some podcasts, there are many podcasts that people just do for fun, for a hobby. And I still think you can get value from this episode and what you can share with us. But to be clear, LinkedIn is a place for business. And I believe personally, every business needs to have a podcast. So how can anyone grow their podcast using LinkedIn?
So in my opinion, the most important thing about podcasts is that you're usually interviewing somebody like me. And what people have realized is that podcast owners have realized, and podcast guests have realized, that it's a great strategy for digital PR, because no one's going to say no to an interview. That's the most successful thing that podcasts have going for them. No one's going to say no for an interview because every SME owner needs that awareness, that brand awareness that comes from being on a podcast. No matter how small it is, at some point they might reach 10 million subscribers and people will go back and listen to old podcasts. But I used to do interviews for a blog for one of the startups that I was a CMO for. And so we had a whole series called Expert. I can't remember, but it was based on expertise within the ESG world, right? So I reached out to all sorts of experts in the ESG world, and literally nobody said no to me. I was able to interview all of them because they knew that I was going to share the video via YouTube. I was going to share the blog via the website. So for them, it's like, wow, instant PR, right? So no one's going to say no to you. And then there's a lot of advantages that follow that. They are getting a bit of an ego stroke right? So they love that. So they're seeing their face. Every SME owner has a bit of an ego, no matter what degree. So they love seeing themselves, and they're going to share that on their LinkedIn. They're going to tag you, right? They're going to say, thanks, Neil, which is what I'm going to do whenever you publish this podcast. And it's why I'm on the podcast, because I want more PR from podcasts, right? So everybody wants this. So you, as a podcast host, you have a huge advantage that you have unlimited experts that you can interview. 99% are going to say yes, because free PR is free PR, and that's why we're here. It's free PR.
I love it, because I just done an episode that will be out already now if you're listening to this one or watching this one. And 7 reasons why every business needs to start a podcast. And one of the reasons, and I tell this to my clients, the secret sauce of podcasting is not sponsorship. It's not about having thousands of listeners. It's about networking and talking to other people. And nobody says no, because I said the exact same thing. Everybody has an ego. If anyone asked me to be on a podcast, I'd be like, yeah, absolutely, 100%. And then what you struck on there as well really hit me, because the blog portion of it, the SEO, I interviewed somebody for my other podcast, the Vietnam podcast, a while ago, and she contacted me just this week, and she's like, hey, are you able to change the thumbnail, because it's just an unflattering picture of me. It's not a problem, but it's just I have better pictures. We did this months ago. And she's like, I've just realized that, I'm building my personal brand, and when you Google my name, your thumbnail comes up, which she's like, that's amazing. Like, that's incredible. The SEO is working. Can I give you another picture to change it so I present myself better? And I was like, of course you can. Just send it to me and I'll update it. So that just shows you the power of podcasting, that she's in Switzerland and she's messaging me saying, your podcast is helping my personal brand. Can you help me, or can you change it?
Yeah, it's super powerful.
Yeah. So as a podcast owner, a podcast host, why not Facebook?
Well, for me, it comes down to a few things, but the algorithm in Facebook has changed in the last 5 years, and it's getting harder and harder for small businesses to get engagement. Right now, the way that the Facebook algorithm works, and is why I'm completely off Facebook for marketing, is that they call it their quote unquote friends first algorithm. It means that the first post, the way they spin it, is that the first posts you see are from friends. And then the second post you see are from sponsored ads. So as a small business, the engagement has been brought down significantly because they want you to spend money on ads. When you do spend money on ads, you're giving Meta and Zuckerberg money, but their customer service is awful. So when you need if you have a problem with the way that your business pages are set up in Facebook, they don't help you. So there's a lot of issues that I have with Facebook, and it's just the wrong audience, because if you look at your whole audience on Facebook and you're doing B2B business, maybe if you're lucky, 40% of your audience on Facebook that are seeing your posts are actually in B2B, and the rest are probably not. Whereas LinkedIn, that audience is more attuned to your target audience, right? So we're here talking about B2B. That's why you want to be on LinkedIn. Instagram makes it easier for you to reach out to specific people and convince them to follow you, but it's more hard work. It's more manual and more tedious. You're going in and you're finding your target audience manually, and you're commenting on their photos, and you're trying to kind of convince them to check out your profile and then follow you. But LinkedIn's algorithm is much more conducive to B2B SME owners. If they see a certain amount of engagement within the first 30 minutes, they're going to blow it up. And so, yeah, those are the main differences.
And part of this podcast is me sharing my mistakes. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I've made over the years is spending too much time on Facebook and Instagram, because I'm nearly a boomer these days, and that's just the platforms that I use. So I'm going to post on Facebook and Instagram. The biggest thing I learned is over the years is when you're posting on Facebook, it's still, I think the latest stats I just read is 63% of people in America or worldwide listen to a podcast in the last year. So still 40% of people don't listen to podcasts. And when you're advertising on Facebook or you're posting on Facebook, you're asking them to do something they've never done before. So not only are you promoting your podcast, you're saying, hey, have you ever listened to podcasts? Check this out. And then, so that's not the best use of your time or your money if you're going to do advertising as well. I've not done much advertising on Facebook in years. I did a little bit. It didn't move the needle at all. It's really difficult to move the needle in terms of downloads, in terms of viewers on Facebook. I did a little bit on LinkedIn, not to get viewers, but to get more people, get more attraction to my page. And the customer service was actually incredible because I had a problem on LinkedIn, and this is something that watch out for. I clicked the button that was let them do automatic extensions to my parameters that I'd put down. Like I'd put down, I want to advertise in America, Australia, New Zealand, something like that. But then I clicked this button that said that they will do, I can't remember the name of it, but they can expand the advertising based on what they think is best. And then I noticed that the people that were responding to my ad were in locations that I had not picked. And I looked at their profiles, they didn't speak English. And I was like, why are these being targeted? Got in touch with LinkedIn. They got back to me and they said, because I'd clicked that button, it allows the parameters to be extended. And I was like, no, I don't want that. They gave me a credit, which didn't cover all the money I'd spent on advertising, but they did give me a credit. And then because I was spending money on advertising, I got a phone call, like 2 or 3 phone calls with a LinkedIn advertising specialist who actually talked me all through how to set an ad, things to avoid, things to do, and it was just so helpful. So I can see what you mean in terms of their customer service is much better.
Yeah. Just as an example, this is why I gave up on Facebook. I had a big problem with one of my startups that I was working on related to the Facebook page. It was set up wrong in the beginning, so we needed to change the ownership. Long story short, every time that I logged into the Meta platform to access my support ticket, they would give me a new agent. And that agent wouldn't read the previous conversation. So every time I was restarting everything and I was pulling my hair out. And LinkedIn wouldn't do that. Like they're like you just said, their customer service is great.
So how can you grow your podcast on LinkedIn?
So I would really focus on your guests, the guests that you're bringing on. One, you also want to focus on the pain points of your target audience. What are the questions that they're asking as it relates to your service? And then match those pain points up with your target guests that you're reaching out for. And then when you're looking at your target guests, get the ones with the highest engagement on LinkedIn and the highest amount of followers, because they will share on their page. And this is why we're here. They're sharing that podcast episode on their page, and then their followers become your followers because they're going to tag you. They're going to say, thanks for sharing the podcast, blah, blah, blah. But you have to always keep your customer persona in mind. What are their pain points? And then match up the pain points with those experts that you want to bring in as guests. And then tag. And then there's other follow-ups. For example, once you interview them, you got the podcast notes. Right now with AI, it's so easy to just transcribe it. You can very quickly turn that transcription into a blog and then send them the blog and say, hey, it would be great if you publish this on your website. And then they publish on the website, and then it has a backlink to your Spotify or YouTube page or your website. So for your audience who don't know, backlinks is a very important formula in search engine optimization. If you want your website or your podcast to pop up in Google search, the more third-party media references that you have, so the more links from very powerful websites that link to your podcast page, the higher your site will appear in Google search.
This is why people pay for backlinks. I get people emailing me semi-regularly saying, hey, can we put a link on your website? We'll pay you to do it, things like this. I generally don't do it. I think the last one was like a casino company in Macau or something like that. I was like, no, that's completely unrelated to my podcast, so no. But that is a massive strategy. What we recommend and what we do is exactly what you said. So make a video, take the audio, that's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, take the AI transcript, we write a blog, that goes on our website, the links to the podcast are on our website. And what we've just started doing recently is taking that blog and then posting it as an article on LinkedIn as well. So then there's more, and then we'll tag the person in the comments. And do you think, is that a good strategy as well?
You shouldn't be copying word for word.
No. Oh, no.
Because, that's kind of plagiarism, but Google will only rank one of those
Right.
because it's a duplicate.
Mm.
So I would do a different strategy. So I would post the article on your website and then something else on LinkedIn. Do a different version of it on LinkedIn, maybe. Or do a different version and get him or her, whoever you interview, to post it on theirs. You don't want to post duplicate content on, you mean you're publishing it as an article embedded in LinkedIn or as a post. It's different.
So we go to article on LinkedIn and then we just copy and paste it pretty much, because we're not really trying to get that to rank on Google. It's just so we have more content on LinkedIn.
Oh, fair. Then that's fine.
That's okay.
If you don't want to rank that LinkedIn article on Google and you just want to rank the other one, it should be fine.
Yeah.
As long as the author is the same author. You want to make sure that the author is the same, and then Google will understand what you're doing.
Yeah, so it's published under my name.
And publish it first on the website.
Yeah.
Because
that's
the
what
way
we do.
they record it in order. So the first one that gets published is the one that gets ranked.
Right.
The second one gets ignored.
That is a good tip to know as well. So I did your LinkedIn workshop. It was absolutely fantastic, and it helped build my LinkedIn profile. So what should somebody do to build the LinkedIn profile?
So I always tell everybody it's about how you can convey what you do, and the value you bring immediately when somebody looks at your profile. So there's 4 questions or 5 questions that I ask that you should be able to answer immediately when somebody looks at your profile. So it's, what do you do? How do you do it? How does that make my life easier? Why should I trust you? This is the most important one. Why should I trust you? And how do I engage with your services? Right? So you have to be able to answer those 5 questions clearly and immediately when someone looks at your profile. So you, for example, how do I trust you? Through recommendations. So at the bottom of your profile, in the middle of your profile, you have the recommendations. These are people who you've worked with or your clients who have recommended you, and they've written kind of a review.
You can't just say, trust me, bro.
You can't just say, trust me, bro, because that sounds scammy.
This was one of the best pieces of advice that I took away from that workshop, because I didn't even know about this. There was so much in that workshop that I had never even heard of, and the recommendations one, I didn't even know that was a thing. And so I reached out to people, and one thing I did, I think I talked to you about this to see if it was a good idea, because nobody wants to do any extra work. Somebody asks you to do something, like, yeah, I'll do it. So what I did was, again, using AI, using ChatGPT, I wrote it for them and said, here, can you do this recommendation for me? Edit this if you want. This is what it is. And I think everybody I asked did one for me.
Yeah. If they had a good experience with you, they're not going to say no, right? And remember, when you're writing those recommendations, to put those keywords that are associated with your services, because the algorithms will scrape those recommendations to make sure that it's relevant to what you do. So always include, so if you're a podcast producer, include the word Neil as a podcast producer, and then so it's relevant.
I think I inadvertently did that. I don't know if I did it on purpose, but I'm sure it's in there.
Now you know.
Now I know. What else would you say to somebody that's looking at LinkedIn and they go, right, I need to change this? A couple other tips that you gave in that workshop that was so helpful.
Yeah, so you want to include, I call it kind of like sales data. So this is part of why I should trust you and how you do it. So for example, my sales data is that $10 million in acquisition revenue. So I helped a logistics company grow their SEO, and we got them over $10 million in acquisition revenue just from organic leads within the first year. So that's kind of part of my unique value proposition, that as I sell myself in terms of my past experience, having those numbers is really important. $10 million is a big number that pops out and people stop. So you should include data that backs up your expertise. And then having a unique value proposition as part of that data is super important. What makes you different from anyone else? Because one of the big problems is LinkedIn is noise. There's a lot of noise. Everyone's kind of doing the same thing when you scroll on it. How do you make your profile pop? How do you make a difference? So it's by creating your unique value proposition. I do this in this way differently from anyone else, right? So what I do is I help SME owners scale their business by 10x. And my backup is I help my previous customers get $10 million in acquisition revenue. So having your unique value proposition plus data to back it up and put that in your bio, put that in your headline, that really, that strikes a chord and it makes your profile pop.
And that has really helped my profile pop. Go back to the beginning of this episode, I was already using these numbers that we've helped over 50 podcasts, produced over 700 episodes, helped podcasts get to the top of the Apple charts. So I had these figures, but then after talking to you, I was like, right, I got to get that on my profile right there, front and center again, so people can trust you and see what you've done. It was so helpful. What I've always struggled with, and I think I figured it out finally, is that unique selling point, because I find that so difficult, especially it's difficult to be unique. Most people, you're doing something that someone else has done before. Do you have any tips of how to create your own unique selling points?
What I always say is you benchmark, go through a bunch of profiles and see what they've written and see what kind of strikes a chord. So as an example, a friend of mine, he has a really good unique value proposition, but he does something very different from anyone else. He's a somatic therapist and he helps stressed out professionals. So it's about helping people live more fulfilled lives. And that was amazing hearing that. If you're doing like me, I work in marketing and it's the most saturated industry in the world, I think. And you really have to make it that extra effort of making yourself stand out. So for me, I'm very passionate about helping SME owners. And it's true, it's not just my unique value proposition. So that's part of my story. Like it's kind of telling your story. Why you do this? I do it because I really like helping SME owners scale their brands, especially SME owners who I like and I respect. Right. So that's kind of what crafted my UVP based on kind of my passion in what I do.
And it's a good way of looking at it, because I think so, as I mentioned, I've just like recently, like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, redefined my unique value proposition. And I do a lot of things without thinking, but now when I think about it from what you said there, because it's something you're passionate about. So we did an exercise recently, we as our team, of the core mission and the values of 7 Million Bikes podcast. And we came down to 3 words, and it was quality, creativity, and positive influence. And so we always refer back to that. And so when I think about that, the quality for us is number one. Like we want to make quality podcasts. And I've just done a video about it, about how you can make a quality podcast with little equipment. You don't need a studio. Right now, we're in a meeting room. I think it's going to turn out pretty good based on experience and based on the equipment that we have. So we've won awards for it. And again, I don't want to toot my own horn, but winning awards was just the best thing ever, because it was like, holy shit, we know what we're doing. And one of the things that we do is every podcast we make for a client goes through 2 editors, which I've never seen anyone else do before. So then I was like, that is a unique value. I only just realized that we always go through 2 editors. One of the reasons why is even I'm not perfect. Like if I make a podcast for someone and then send it to them, they're probably going to find like a little noise that I missed, or maybe I've missed a complete sentence that should have been cut out. It's difficult to do that. So the way that 7 Million Bikes podcasts work is we have a junior editor who does the first edit, then the senior editor goes through that, checks it, gives her the feedback, her or him the feedback, and then they'll finish it. So it means when we deliver it to the client, it should be 100%. And I do audits on this podcast, on Smarter Podcasting. I audit other podcasts, and I often find little mistakes because they've hired somebody to do it and it's not gone through that extra quality check. So that's one thing that we do. We have a 2-day turnaround for audio, 4-day for video. I offer a monthly strategy call with all of our clients as well. And so I put these things together and I was like, oh no, we do actually have some unique value points. So that really helped with LinkedIn as well. For that listener right now that's thinking, I don't want to do LinkedIn, I've never done it, Facebook is my jam, I like being on Facebook, what would you say to them to say, this really is how you can help your podcast grow?
If they think Facebook is their jam, definitely stay on Facebook if it works for them. I'm not saying go off of Facebook, but remember that LinkedIn will open up a whole new audience for you. if you can do it right, if you can create that really high value content that makes people engage and like your post, it's a whole other ball game, and you have to be there. And it's not that much hard work. Take the same post that you're putting on Facebook. Keep your target audience in mind when you're crafting your post, especially the first sentence. You always want to you want to add a hook to that first sentence to bring people in. Remember that it's a different audience from Facebook. It's a more business savvy audience. Craft your captions different, your posts different, but it doesn't mean that you have to completely start from scratch when you're posting on LinkedIn. You can still cross post. You just make those small modifications. And just like I said before, it's a different audience. You're putting your content in front of a different set of eyeballs. And at least experiment with LinkedIn and see what happens. You won't actually see the results until maybe 6 months later if you're posting consistently every week.
And I think what you're saying is that you can find your audience on LinkedIn, because on Facebook, your Facebook page is going to be friends and family. People not in your niche, so you're going to be sharing it with people that already know you. If you create a page, like you said, the engagement's not there. If it's not your personal page, it's really hard to build that persona on Facebook, I think, because it's mostly your friends and family. Whereas with LinkedIn, you don't connect with your friends and family on LinkedIn. You connect with people in your niche. So as I gave the example of the knitting podcast, ultimately she had a craft business. So I say it's a knitting podcast, but she did have a business behind the podcast that was supporting that. So if that person then goes on LinkedIn and finds other people in the craft industry, and that's what blows me away, no matter what your niche is, there's a community out there that you will find. So she could find all these other people on LinkedIn that are in the craft business. And then you start to post that content and you're going to start to build a network really, really quickly. And that's the biggest difference that I've seen on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's always there. And remember, there's groups. So Facebook has groups that are really effective, that are much better than LinkedIn actually. But you have groups for all the niches, and you can reach in, you can see the followers, the members of those groups, and connect with them. And remember that Facebook, adding somebody on Facebook that you don't know is creepy. But on LinkedIn, it's normal.
That's so
You're
true.
always you can add anybody on LinkedIn. I always add somebody on LinkedIn, and I always send the same message. Hey, I want to increase my network of these type of people in this geography. So I want to reach out to B2B professionals in Ho Chi Minh City. I look forward to connecting. Something like that. No, it's not creepy on LinkedIn. You can do that. And that's I forgot about that. That's one of the biggest advantages of LinkedIn. And that's how you build your audience. I have 5,000 followers on LinkedIn, and probably half of those were me just manually reaching out and bringing them value.
I love that. It'd be creepy if you sent that. It would be so creepy if you sent that to someone on Facebook. I hardly accept any friend requests on Facebook because my Facebook is personal. It's for friends and family. I have barely any. I have 400 friends on Facebook or something like that, which I think is not many. Some people have thousands and thousands. So that's made me laugh. That's a good one. What's been the biggest challenge using LinkedIn?
The engagement has dropped in the last year or two. Unfortunately, I think that LinkedIn's kind of going down the path of Facebook. They don't have enough. They might not have enough people using LinkedIn ads. Normally, a company reaches a certain peak, and then they have a lot of pressure from their board members to raise their profits. So LinkedIn's owned by Microsoft. Microsoft's probably setting certain sales KPIs on LinkedIn. So at some point they will do the same as Facebook, if they're not already doing that. And they will start dropping business engagement, which means you have to be more creative. And one thing that works on LinkedIn now is videos.
I literally was about to say that was the next thing I was going to say.
You have to start doing videos.
Yeah. It's the same. I've talked about it on this podcast. You just have to embrace video, not audiograms, not moving images with words. Those don't work at all. You need to do what I'm doing right now. Get in front of a camera, get comfortable with it. And LinkedIn is now pushing video like every other content because it's how people like to engage, right?
Yeah. And a new format is shorts. So they're competing. Everyone's trying to compete with TikTok using the short format. And I've seen more and more people doing shorts. So a general rule with all social media platforms, if they launch something new, in the first 6 months of that launch, they're going to have really high engagement on that feature that they just launched. When Instagram started doing Reels, they did it because they're trying to compete with TikTok. So the engagement on Reels was ridiculous the first 6 months they launched it. So now's the time to take advantage of Reels or Shorts, whatever they're called on LinkedIn. Now, like people, anybody listening to this, if they're frustrated with engagement on LinkedIn, start doing Shorts.
Yeah. And then this is our strategy. We do Shorts on Instagram, on YouTube, and now on LinkedIn as well. And the reach now it's insane. We're reaching tens of thousands of people via Shorts, whereas the episode might still only get 50 to 100 to 200 people. But this short form content across all the platforms. And my biggest tip would be consistent and just keep going, because you don't know which clip will go viral. And not everyone does. Like every fifth or sixth one of ours, we don't really know what happens, but one of them will get like 10,000 views and then the one after will get 100. But regularly they will get views. So we post about 5 short form videos for every episode. And we do it consistently, and we've been doing it for months now. And sometimes they don't do very well, and then you get that massive spike. And I've looked at the numbers across all the platforms and on the podcast and on YouTube, and it can literally increase your reach by 10,000 just by doing that. So that would be my biggest tip. Joel, thank you so much for coming on Smarter Podcasting. I hope you got so much value off of that. Don't forget, follow, subscribe, turn on notifications, do all that stuff that's going to help this podcast grow. But the best thing that you can do is share this with someone else who wants to make the best podcast possible. And if you need help with your podcast, please reach out to me. This is what we do at 7 Million Bikes Podcast. We help you make the best podcast possible. So go to the show notes, you can find the link, or go to 7millionbikes.com and book a discovery call with me, and I can share with you how we can help you. And we can help you save frustration and time, because that is one of the biggest things for podcasters. I know myself, it takes about 8 to 10 hours to make just one episode. So get in touch with me and we can help remove all that frustration and all that time. So Joel, thank you very much. This has been amazing. I really appreciate your time and so much good value. And thank you for helping my LinkedIn grow.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. Cheers.